Okay. We're going to call the Wednesday, February 1st, 2023 Board of Education meeting back to order. Everyone please silence your electronic devices and we will stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Additions and deletions to the agenda since Friday mailing.
Yes, business considerations, we'll be adding 6.16 will be an SMOA with the Teachers Association. 6.17 will be a cooperative agreement with the Hudson Valley Community College. 6.18 will be a settlement agreement with the CSEA Food Service. Personnel considerations, 711 will be a resignation of a PBIS coach, and we will be updating an information item 8.1.
Okay. Can I get a motion for the additions? Mr. McFerrin, Mr. Ross, all in favor? Aye. I need a motion for the acceptance of the minutes of the January 11th, 2023 BOE meeting. Mr. McFerrin, a second. Mrs. Hoteling, all in favor? Aye. And we have some special presentations. So I will turn it over to Dr. Bailey.
Because there's always a level of fine print to any budgetary presentation, we provide it in print for our audience that's here, and also we'll have it displayed on the screen here. There's a copy of the budget calendar on your tables, and we have tried to map out the pathway to you for when we get to our May 16th budget vote, May 15th budget vote. May 16th budget vote. I should probably get that right. Our plan is to let this story roll out in a way that is meaningful for both our experienced and our new board members, and so that our community understands. The other thing also for our board members, Jesse has assembled a terms and definitions form document that's on the table there as well that helps with some of the terminology around this. This is very complex work. It's a building of $53+ million budget. We have an awesome responsibility to our taxpayers, and as one of the primary responsibilities as a board member, of course, understanding the logistics of it is very important. So each week when we present portions of the budget, we'll be adding to this definitions list to try and help along the way. And you see some of those things that are topics of discussion for today: the tax levy, which for almost 7 years now, 8 years, we've heard 2% tax cap, and there is really no such thing. Very few exact 2% tax caps. It's a complex formula that Jesse will describe. Talking about state aid, and as Jesse will discuss, you've heard in the news the governor's State of the State address yesterday, and lots of discussion about fully funding of foundation aid and what that means for school districts across New York State. Our reserve plan, meaning the monies that we are being good stewards of, putting away so that we are prepared, such as our capital reserve, a great deal of which we're using for the recently voted on $15 million budget. It helps flatten the budgetary or the tax impact on our taxpayers. We'll do a little bit of class sizes. Uniform replacement plan is tucked in here rather than in where athletics is, primarily because I promised that we would have a better understanding of what some of the budgetary impact would be for rebranding. As we're expected to move away from our current mascot, what's some of the impact? And it's logical to put uniform replacement in there, as we've had some other discussions about uniforms. And then I just have a quick list of rebranding needs that potentially we've come up with so far, and there may be more. We did a walkthrough with Buildings and Grounds 2 weeks ago, and while we were doing that, we were not only looking at building conditions and some of the repairs that have been done as part of the emergency project for the pool filter, but also things that will be done ideally this summer in our small $2 million project. We also looked for branding. where are those areas that'll be affected by our requirement to move to updated mascot. So I'm going to hand it over to Jesse.
Thank you very much, Dr. Bailey. So we'll get right into it. Kind of already reviewed what the steps are, what we're going to discuss tonight. So I will go first to the tax levy limit. Like Dr. Bailey said, it is not a 2% tax. It is actually a multi-step formula. First, starting off with the prior year tax levy. That's what we went out with the district. This is a very important number because if you don't go at the top of the tax levy limit, it does affect future abilities to go higher if we need to. Next step down is the tax-based growth factor. This is given to us by the state, and basically what this is any new building on top of our assessments. So new construction, new improvements. And then we add back into our pilots, and you'll see in your packet that we do have pilot schedules in there so we can see where that number came from. That's what we received last year, so you add that back into the formula. Bless you. And then you do a tax levy, capital tax levy from last year. So what that is our we take our capital expense and the debt for the year, and we back out our building aid we get on it. It also includes the transportation capital expense. So we get that. That is what right there. That's a prior year, that 1.3 million. That's what we were on the last year's levy. So we add that back in, and then the allowable levy growth factor. And this is where you see the 2% this year. Actually, that's the highest we can go, and that's based on the CPI, or the inflation rate. So as everybody knows, the inflation rate is very high right now, but that is the max, the 2%. So then if we move down, you'll see the pilots that we anticipate to receive this year, the 2.6. Again, there's a schedule in your packet that shows exactly where that's coming from. So that gives us our total limit, our limit before we have any exclusions. Do you have the question? Yeah. Sure.
So our max is 154, or is our max?
Yeah. That's the max limit right now. And I forgot to say in the beginning, there's a lot of estimated numbers on this too. This is not a final right now. This is an estimate. There's still some outstanding stuff, but I kind of wanted to explain to you exactly how it's calculated, and then I'll obviously give you a final in a later presentation. So our capital expense and backing out our building aid for the 23-24 school year will be $971,000. So you add that into the tax levy limit before exclusion, so you have those exclusions on top. So our allowable tax levy limit is right above 27 million for the 23-24 school year, and that is a 1.54% increase. If we were to stay within that, just increase that amount, we only need a 50 plus 1 vote for approval. But if we decide to go over that amount, we would need a supermajority of at least 60%. Again, there's still some outlying numbers in this. And again, I'll do another presentation later with the final one.
And it's important to remember that tax levy percentage is not representative necessarily of what happens to our taxpayers. And as we go to the next slide and we look at the increases in state aid, that will positively affect our taxpayers. So 1.54 does not mean that taxes will go up for our community 1.54%.
There's a lot more to it.
There's a lot more to it.
Yeah. Before we move on, is there any additional questions on tax levy limit? Okay, state aid. And oops, sorry. I did do this presentation before the governor put out their numbers, and she did put the numbers out here at, 3 o'clock today? So actually, I'm happy to announce that top number, the foundation aid, which is our highest state aid category. She is indicating by her her proposal that we will be getting an increase from about a little over $12 million to $13.5 million. And that will have us fully funded with the foundation aid. It is not final. It's still got to go through the legislation, but that is in her budget right now. So that's a good increase. So high cost, this is, so I will say the high cost, private excess cost, and BOCES aid and building aid are all what you call expense-driven, and transportation aid. They're all what you call expense-driven aids. So we get aided based on the expenses that we have this year. So we have a general idea of what they're going to be. So we do a analysis of what we're expending this year, and we can give some estimates on where we expect to be in the next year. High cost aid is based on special ed students in public school, and there's a ratio for an aid ratio for that. There also is a local deduction that's taken off of that. Private excess cost is special ed students in out-of-district placements. Or building aid is all of our capital expenses for our capital projects. BOCES aid is expense that our services that we get through BOCES is aided. Transportation aid, the same thing, transportation expense. And hardware and technology and instructional material aids, those are based on enrollment. So you see a little bit of a drop there, and that's basically because we saw a little bit of drop in our enrollment. Is there any questions on that? Again, that was real quick going through that. Any descriptions? I'm more than happy to go into it more. But you'll see, again, these are estimate. We're going to lock them down even better once we get a little bit more information. But right now we're looking at some good increases from the foundation aid as well as the building aid. The building aid increase was because we did get that larger capital project. We did a final cost report, so now we're eligible for the aid. Okay. And reserves. So quickly, I'm just going to review reserves. So these are the balances as of December 31st. So unemployment, the unemployment insurance reserve is to reimburse the state unemployment insurance fund for payments of claims. So right now we have a little bit over $50,000 in there. The employee retirement reserve is for non-instructional employees with the district. Currently, last year we paid a little bit over $600,000 in our contributions. So right now we have a little bit over $1.2 million for those. Teacher retirement reserve is for the teachers to help pay for the contributions to those reserves. And last year we paid right around $1.7 million for contributions. Reserve for tax certiorari, those are for if we have any paid judgments from tax certiorari. So basically, if someone argues their assessments on their house and they're awarded an increase or something, we can use this to offset those payments. Capital reserve, that is for big, large capital projects, and that number does not include the $750,000 and the $5.1 million that we will be using for our 2 capital projects. So it just hasn't been moved yet. General practice, we don't like to move the money until it's approved by SED. So those the money's still in there. Reserve for debt, that is money left over from money from sales of buildings and capital assets, and we have to use that money to pay down debt. That's outstanding debt that the district has for those capital assets that we sold. Employee benefit reserve, this is a reserve for employees when they get payouts when they leave the district for sick time, vacation time, and other accruals. This is a great reserve to use so we don't have to budget for those additional expenses for when people retire. Sometimes those can get pretty high, and this helps kind of not being big fluctuations in budget numbers. Repair reserve, this is just for repairs. You can't do anything new, new construction with it, but it's there for things like big repair things like, you know, something happens to the turf field. We can use this to help make the fixes for that. So right now we're right about 13.1 million in our reserves, which, as you see in our thing, we're very fiscally sound. So it's good to have this right now.
You mentioned which of the reserves can only be moved by a vote from the public?
Yes, yes. So the capital reserve is the one where you cannot move or add things to it without the approval of the public.
Reserve amounts established.
We do have a reserve plan. Yeah.
Okay.
Yep,
Are there
it is.
goals? Are there goals set for each reserve fund? Is there like a goal funding amount?
I did not see that on that. We explained why we have the amount
Okay.
of those reserves, but that's something that I've done at different districts,
Yeah.
and I think that is a great idea. Reasons why we have it that much, and we would like it to be this high or this low,
Right.
and the reasons why. Yeah, I
Okay.
think that's a great idea. Any questions on those? Okay. I'll pass it back to Dr. Bailey.
Very quickly, I'm going to go through the elementary, middle, and high school on our average class sizes. The one thing that's not reflected here, because the elementary, those of you with elementary children, you may be aware, we gravitate between 3 and 4 sections for each grade level. And interestingly, our building populations are very similar right now between Peterby and Becker. They've varied from a difference of as high as 80 students, but we're pretty close right now in population. And so our average class size at Becker and Peterby, you can see, are pretty well matched. You can see probably with your own analysis here, some of the greatest variances are due to sometimes we have 3 sections and sometimes we have 4. And I apologize, I didn't make a note to myself of which ones do right now. But for instance, grade 4 at Becker at the higher number of 21 is likely a section of 3. The other thing that we know is principals and their staff are constantly strategizing to figure out where to best allocate those staff. So sometimes we might have 4 sections in 3rd and 3 sections in 4th, and sometimes we have 3 sections in 3rd and 4 sections in 4th. And it's not only based on student population, sometimes it's based on the needs of the students in that particular grade that we move staff around. But on the overall, as far as state averaging goes, these numbers are not bad. They're maybe a little low for New York State, but they're not bad. And especially as we are seeking to try and recover from a lot of the things that did or didn't happen during the pandemic, these are good class sizes for us to accomplish that work. Do you have any questions about the elementary schools? I will mention pre-K. We have 2 half-day programs, a morning and an afternoon, in each of our buildings. Those count as 2 programs, a morning and an afternoon. So there's 4 total sections. And what Fred's been talking about is how we move to full-day kindergarten or pre-kindergarten. There are some grants out there, some competitive grants, as well as some other grants available to us that can help us do that. The complexity is finding space and finding staff to be able to do that, and determine whether we have the fiscal capacity to subsidize it, because it may or may not pay all of the salaries for all of the staff. So that can be impactful too, but none of us can refute the benefit of teaching 3- and 4-year-olds before they get to kindergarten. Having the experience of school and having the early literacy and numeracy is very powerful. So I will attest, and Fred's not here tonight, but I will attest that he spends hours every waking day trying to hit deadlines to see if we can pull this off either next year or the following year. And by the time we round up this budget season, we'll know whether it's possible for next year and what the budgetary impact will be for us. You have any questions about the elementary school?
There's a lot of in and out within, I know, the elementaries throughout the year, so I know it's a challenge, coming up with the initial determination of how many classes to have in a grade can be challenging.
You could have a lot of students move in after the second week and a lot of students leave.
Right.
Agreed. And none of us can necessarily predict when our houses will close or our jobs will start or end, so I agree. And I would say that we're probably back on average again about our mobility among our populace as we were before the pandemic. So we have quite a few people coming in and going all the time.
Brian,
Yeah.
can you give us a little insight as to why there's only a multi-age K-1 in one building and not the other?
We offered the opportunity for staff to volunteer to do this work,
Okay,
and some did and some didn't.
okay.
So in the building where that isn't happening, we've just utilized a different intervention strategy. And that, and in all honesty, the map of this may look different next year. It could be a mixed grade 1-2 or 2-3. Yeah, there are other MAT classes. I don't know why they're not on
Because
there.
the A.W. Becker has a 2-3,
They
right?
do, they do.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't know why it's not reflected on there. But please know that a MAT class is 2 grades, and that section will be reflected in the numbers that are up there. So even though there are 2 grades in there, the classes are reflected in the grade level of, numbers, class size, and sections that are there. Middle school's a different animal as far as scheduling goes. You see the class sizes are a little larger here. It has some of the dynamics of a high school where you have some choices, and some of the dynamics of an elementary school where you know what the mandated elements are that you need to include. So we do end up with larger class sizes. I know that Denise and Steve and their staff have been working very hard to create a teaming model, which at the middle school level is a very celebrated and recognized way of trying to do wraparound services for our kiddos. And you can see, and it's a little harder to keep count too, because you could have a 7th grader who's in Science 7 and a handful that are in Honors 7, and it's likewise in 8th grade for math and science. So it does become complex. And our overall enrollment, I was just saying yesterday, our overall enrollment is just wrong size to do the perfect. If we could have 8 sections in 6th grade and 8 sections in 7th and 8 sections in 8th, then you've got your core math, science, English, social studies, and teaming time and everything rotating around it. But with 120 to 150 in a grade level, it just doesn't work that way. So it is pretty complex for a middle school schedule. Any questions about the middle school enrollment?
Do we have more people taking math than English in 7th grade?
7th grade, it's separated out. There's honors math or
But
accelerated math.
I'm just looking at the averages. And is it just one class of 23? Is that what it is of
That's the
Excel math?
maximum in, it says.
Yeah, I see where you're going, Bill. So I would assume that I can't tell you actually specifically
it
whether
just
there's
looked
four, 5, or 6 sections of math, but Jenny's right. Taking some of the students out of math for the accelerated math changes the numbers. But no, everybody in 7th grade is taking 1 English and 1 math. Yes. They're super smart. We count them extra.
Brian, in the previous slide where you had the last 2 grow and career for middle schoolers, when you have minimums of 1 and 2, how are we allocating a teacher for a single student and counting that as a class?
GROW is supported by a TA, teaching assistant, and they don't do it as a standalone class. There's a resource component, and then there's a lot of push-in and support of teachers. So that number is a little bit difficult to analyze. It's not the same as
It's not
having a
apples to
section
apples, all right.
of class.
See, it's behind Pete's head to me.
And students, to some extent, can move in and out of that program too. High school is definitely one of the hardest ones to determine sections or section numbers, and you may see some that look especially low. What we're aiming for is as rich a diverse a program as we can offer, so it isn't uncommon maybe to have some world language classes that are small, or the average being drawn down because you have levels 5 and 6 where it is just maybe 8 kids or 10 kids that are left in the program, whereas Spanish 2 might have 25 in the class or 24. Overall, these numbers are actually pretty good for high school. It isn't uncommon to see high school average class sizes gravitating in the mid-20s to 30 because it's a generalized class. I equate it to like psychology 100 in college where there's 300 people in a room. Everybody has to take some version of English 9. Everybody has to take some version of English 10. So it allows us to spread kids out more liberally, but when you're trying to put them in physics, there's only 1 or 2 classes of physics. It's a lot harder to schedule, a lot harder to get the kids in there. And obviously that's the top of the pyramid of our science program. So in each successive year, fewer and fewer students are likely enrolled. Science electives is very broad. We have anatomy and physiology. We have, what's the other one we're offering now? Microbiology, yeah. Again, it's students who have gotten to the top of that pyramid and have self-selected to do that. Any questions about high school?
I guess I want to ask, as much as we never want to reduce our offerings, like we take a lot of pride in having a pretty robust menu of choices. At what point when you get to those highest levels of achievement, like a Spanish, 5, I think, if there's only 3 people taking that class, are they getting the benefit out of it? You know, if there's 1 absence, you're down to 2. If,
Right.
you know, I'm just curious at what point the resources for offering such a specialty outweighs offering it.
And as part of our procedures, we don't have a minimum class size here. And it's a benefit to us to be able to program richly for our kiddos. I think it will be our responsibility to think deeply. I've talked before about in a year or 2 or 3, there will be a financial accountability for every school and every municipality in Newark, similar to 2010 and 2002, where the bottom just falls out because the state and federal government aren't providing the aid any longer. I think that you'll see more creative means of doing those things, such as partnering with other school districts,
Right.
which is a very intelligent way to go. And with the proliferation of distance learning, for us to be able to broadcast, have our skilled staff be able to share with other districts, that's definitely a way for us to preserve our students' ability to follow those pathways.
Do we know if that's happening anywhere at this point?
Around the Capital District? Absolutely. Yeah, Burn Hills they have 6 distance learning rooms in their building right now. Some of our smaller partners, Green Island, Watervliet, they have COs, they have classrooms set up with that. And it wasn't that long ago where it cost $25,000 to $100,000 to outfit a classroom with distance learning, and the price has dropped down below $5,000 now. It's amazing the technology that they have. So I think it's definitely something on our horizon, and if our student population continues to diminish, it is the only route that we can follow to still be as vibrant as we are.
I think one of the challenges that I've seen happen in the past is scheduling becomes tough because the kids that want to take Spanish 5 also want to take a
Elective
certain
English,
writing
right.
class or certain journalism, and they're always the same time, and you're picking from a group of kids and they have to pick between one or the other. And then, you know, the teacher that teaches Spanish 5 only has a certain period, so I think that becomes a challenge. And then the other challenge is when kids get to be juniors and seniors on if they want to put the extra effort in to take the extra class or to get the college credit can be a challenge, or if they want to coast through. I think it's a challenge from a few different angles.
From a scheduling standpoint,
Yeah.
every high school schedule starts from that student. The one who's in chorus, who's in physics, who's in calculus, who is in Spanish 5, who is in all the single classes. That's how the schedule is built. And then it's that person just plugs them right in. And then everyone else, when there's 2 or 3 sections, it's a lot easier. Then you start strategizing how you capture the most kids, but it is very, very difficult. Because Spanish 5 isn't the only path. There's other paths to go, and they're all singletons too.
Are we at a point where we want to explore through CNI having this type of pilot, where we partner with another school and see how it works?
We likely are, and also I got the compounding challenge of hiring specialists in certain areas is very difficult. World languages are a very difficult area to hire into, and that's, in some instances, it will unquestionably require us to share. I know that English is new language. The ENL teachers, we're very fortunate. We have 2 to service our students. There are many districts who have none, are forced to share with BOCES or to share with other districts. I think that for us to be fiscally responsible to keep providing this, that is unquestionably, sharing is going to have to be on the horizon. To totally change gears, Jen is at, I think she's at a wrestling banquet tonight, which is why she's not at the podium.
Now she's right behind
She's
me.
behind
She
you.
magically appeared. Jen's not at the wrestling banquet anymore.
Can't we just go to
So,
Huh?
come on down.
Yeah,
Jen Murphy.
that's what I said. For the time being, is this
One of the tasks that I set Jen to was to do a good inventory of the uniforms that we have on site and to look at the uniform replacement process. You'll probably remember
These were the ones that-
maybe 4 or 5 years ago, Bob Dorrance, our AD at the time, came and presented to the board. He talked about a 5-year replacement plan. And what we decided at the time is that 5 years was about 4.5 years too long for the life of some of our uniforms. We talk about varsity uniforms and JV uniforms being passed down to modified, or freshman teams when we used to have them, or staying with a varsity team, and they just didn't stand the test of time. So one of the hybridized things that I asked Jen to do was to look at not only our 4-year replacement plan, but look at it in the context of our branding. What uniforms currently have Indians, arrowheads, Indian heads, other things on there that are likely not to be allowed after 2025, that we consider that as we map out this uniform replacement plan. So I'll have her talk through what we've come up with, and knowing that there will be some bumps in the road. That highlight is one that Jen can talk about, but also there may be something that we didn't catch as a component of this search. Or there might be uniforms that were purchased last year or this year that aren't the right thing, and we may need to do some replacement. So.
Thank you, Dr. Bailey. I'll just touch on a few things. I don't want to keep you too long, but as Dr. Bailey said, just going through the general inventory of what I was able to locate so far as uniforms. If you look in the different groups, obviously 4 groups for the 4-year rotation. This was built upon the plan that Bob Dorrance had built. So taking a couple things into consideration, that's where I started from and then moved forward from there. Unfortunately, it's not highlighted, but Group A and Group B throughout the inventory those are the teams right now currently that have some type of indigenous logo or Indians or Indian head on them. So just with the timeline of what we're looking at for uniform replacement, that's how those teams ended up within the Group A and Group B column for the timelines. Also, they were relatively in that scheduled section anyways to be replaced. Certainly a lot of our uniforms, like Dr. Bailey had said, have been to battle, as you can imagine. Just trying to locate where all of them are within our buildings, trying to get a number of, do we have complete sets? What do they look like? What type of condition are they in? Obviously, a lot of uniforms with stains that we definitely aren't going to put our kids in out there to compete in, so a lot of different moving pieces. I did want to mention that in Group D, some of those are most recently purchased uniforms. That's why they're towards the end of the list. So most of those uniforms in that group have already been purchased, but there are some still in the process with our uniform budget that are still left for this school year that we can order. So again, the first two columns are kind of the focus with the timeline we're looking at for changing or updating our mascot. Just,
Groups C or D have the term Indian or any Indian-related
correct,
logos,
except for
images?
boys varsity basketball. Those were most recently purchased before we kind of had the more guidance from state ed, and they do have the spear on the back.
Okay.
So one of the things that we had discussed in the past, or back in 2020, about replacing all these uniforms, and this chart is that when we purchase uniforms, we would purchase them from the top down. So when we pick a sport, let's say soccer, modified JV, varsity, I'll get replacement uniforms all within the same year. Because in the past, we had gotten a lot of complaints about uniforms getting passed down that were old, too big. So we had discussed buying all three teams in the same year.
Okay.
And the other thing, it also made it easier if we were transferring kids or moving kids from JV to varsity, or sometimes modified to JV, that we wouldn't have to worry about finding them new uniforms, that they would be the same uniform. So that was one of the discussions that we had, a few years ago. And I just know that like we bought boys varsity basketball this year, but we didn't buy modified or JV. And the plan we made 3-4 years ago, where we used to have this, all three of them should have gotten purchased this year, or whatever other uniforms. So that was just one of the things when I look, and certain teams are off years, and it may be because of the Indians. But if we have to move a team ahead so they're all on the same calendar year, I think it makes a smarter, choice. And then one of the other things, and I know we haven't had any conversations as far as our brand and the Indians and everything else, I would think the smarter thing to do moving forward is that we would just think of putting RCS and leaving it at that for now. Because it could take us a year, 2 years, or who knows when we come up with a new name. But it just seems like, if we put RCS, it would be the safest way.
Yes,
Is
so
that
that's
what our plan is?
Yeah, so definitely moving forward, I haven't ordered anything with any indigenous logos on them. For example, girls modified basketball, there wasn't enough shorts for our young ladies that weren't staying for the whole team. So we moved forward to make sure that the kids could all have the same uniforms, and those only said RCS on them. So that, I'm glad you bring that up. And thank you for the information for all three teams at all the levels. I didn't have that information. I did have JV and varsity have been ordered together in the past. I'm unsure about varsity basketball, that current situation, but I understand when you have kids moving between levels, you want to make sure that they have consistent uniforms. I know JV and varsity, I believe girls basketball have the same, for fluctuation of our students on those teams.
I think the other challenging thing, is when it comes to sports is, one, you have to worry about numbers.
Right.
Because of moving. And the other thing is sizes. You
Yes.
You could have 25 kids on two teams and order 25 uniforms, but you may have too many mediums or not enough larges. Is what kind of plan do we put together of having extra uniform sizes
Right.
for each level because of that?
Over the course of a couple of years.
Right, because, this year we could have 5 large uniforms on, modified, and next year we have 5 smalls.
Right.
It makes it tough, I think, on, guessing.
Of course, we just want to outfit our kids appropriately size-wise, and I think in the past, a lot of schools did the JV varsity hand-on to modified, but we have such small students that we need to make sure that they're safely and properly equipped. So I think that's probably why maybe the ordering timelines were different here, but it's definitely something we can look at to revisit this list.
So are we saying that moving forward, we're going to have a plan for having those uniforms? Because I know, at least for the girls modified soccer, those uniforms were all over the place, and a lot of those girls were playing in uniforms that were not appropriately sized. And
Right.
comparatively, they got a lot less than the boys did.
So unfortunately, those uniforms were ordered before I came here, and they were not located, and definitely we ran into some issues in the fall that I was not satisfied with. So this definitely was, I'm glad that Dr. Bailey tasked me with this, because this was a major project I wanted to undertake to make sure our students are properly equipped, they look respectful, they have pride in what they're wearing out there. And unfortunately, again, there was some issues that we ran into in the fall trying to locate the new uniforms that were ordered, and they weren't necessarily the right size, or they weren't necessarily enough to outfit the team properly. So we're trying to make sure that these issues are alleviated in the future.
Okay, Okay, but
Yes.
that one isn't slated to be replaced for the next 4 years, so.
So one of the things I just wanted to say, because you were not here originally when we brought this to Bob's attention, you have full support from the Board of Education on what budget needs to be created in order to execute that plan.
Yes.
So I just wanted to let you know that we are fully in support. We were in support of developing a 4-year plan, as well as whatever, I mean, obviously it's not blank check. But,
Of course.
but you know
partially
that,
supported.
but know that,
I'll
that
write that
we
down, thank you.
support that effort.
Thank you.
And if it's baseball, I can't read, softball
Yes.
and basketball, that it's all levels. You know, it would be appreciated if all levels had the same colors, because
Same.
sometimes it's
Well, that should be managed.
different, and I don't know why if we order from different companies and that's not exactly the same. But
Okay.
as you said, pride in our program,
Yeah.
pride and appropriately fitting uniforms, all of that is something that we're looking to get on the right track with.
I think, yeah, just,
appreciate that.
I think it's ask. I mean, it's like next year, 23, 24, like girls modified basketball should be on that list. Like, and if we have to increase our budget next year because we have to add that team, then we increase our budget. At least all the teams are dressed appropriately.
I think
or the same.
taking back off of what Teddy said is if you have the same uniform, varsity all the way down to modified, it will help take, I mean, from a parent of a freshman who's 6'4", playing JV,
Right.
his outfit, his uniform was skin tight on him because he's 6'4". But if you had the same looking
Access.
uniform and access to a varsity uniform, we could have just passed it down to him. And I just think you never know with the sizes and
You
these
could do that
kids
with-
and.
Right.
Yeah.
It's important, and the
Yeah.
same thing with other items. If we order, it's I think of baseball hats, and we have
Everybody's the
3
same.
hats for 3 different teams. That shouldn't happen. It should be from the top down,
Or continuity.
If it's a sock, I mean, it should be the same from top down.
So how do we, going back on Jenny's question there,
Yeah.
so is the girls soccer, that hasn't been, the modified, that hasn't been rectified, correct? So,
They played for an entire season with many of the girls having inappropriately
So
fitting
next
uniforms
year-
and no socks, whereas the boys team got 2 pairs of socks.
next year we should
And
have a
sheer white
plan,
shorts.
right? To move that up so that doesn't happen?
Yeah, so I guess my plan currently for them, there was new uniforms ordered. Unfortunately, we couldn't locate them initially. That's why they had miscellaneous uniforms to start with. So the uniforms that were ordered, I guess, were not enough or not proper sizing. So either revisiting that to order additional uniforms for that same group, or we can just look at ordering completely new set of uniforms for those kids. And the same thing actually happened with boys modified soccer. They were ordered, they were large sizes, they didn't fit the students, and the quality, I guess, was not there. So that was one issue that I was coming across when I did the inventory.
Do we actually order socks for soccer? Is that part? I didn't think we could.
The
or I
boys
didn't
got
think
2
we-
pairs of socks, whether they were part of it or not.
I didn't
They were
think we
ordered
were
before I
supposed
came.
to because we don't take them back.
Take them back.
So that was another project that Dr. Bailey asked me to do, was kind of reach out to other neighboring schools within our league and sort of ask those individual sort of personalized items. What do you order for your students? What comes back? Example, track and field or cross-country spandex, soccer socks, so I'm kind of collecting that information right now. I know, for example, girls varsity soccer with their new Under Armour uniforms, they were ordered at the end of last year. They were on the rotation. The socks were ordered for the students. It all came together. They all matched.
Right.
So that's just one
we don't-
example.
Yeah, the problem we run into, I think, is one, we don't want the socks back because, the kids were, the problem
Found a
when
lot
it
of old
becomes
socks in
is
my search,
you're
yes.
gifting public funds by letting kids keep socks, so it's, are you supposed to do it, or it's the
Right.
fine line.
And other
that we've
ADs
had
had
discussion
questions
before.
about that as well.
Or if we had a website where you could just tell the parents, okay,
Correct.
you can go purchase here.
What do
Socks.
members of the swimming and diving team do?
Those are personal.
They buy their own uniforms?
That's-
Great, so that was
topic
another
before.
specialized sport. What do other schools do? Some students prefer to wear their own suit. Other schools, it's kind of done differently by sport. Some schools purchase their own swim and dive swimsuit that they keep. They have their school logos on them, and I was speaking with Jesse and Dr. Bailey about sort of the continuity and the equity between the programs, between the sports, the expectations. Obviously, when you come to sectionals for swim, they have their full suits that are a bit different than their regular season suits, so I think it's taking those pieces into consideration as well.
Will they fall somewhere within this plan once those decisions are made?
Yes.
Will they be slotted in one of the groups?
Definitely, if that's the route we decide to go.
And then Group D, the boys varsity basketball, do we have the luxury of waiting until 26, 27 to replace those? Assuming that change is required and the current timeline given out by the state?
No.
So that is a good question.
That's the question.
They were just curious about the boys varsity basketball. Are we gonna wait until that Group D time to order again, or do we need to move them up into Group A or B? They just have the spear on the back, they say RCS on the front, I believe.
They have the Indian though on the, don't they have the Indian on the pant?
I mean, Coach has them in his possession at this moment, obviously for in season, but
No, but they have the.
JV does, sorry.
JV, yes.
I can tell you
JV,
for
yeah.
the varsity, it's like a watermarked.
Right,
It's
yes.
a watermark spear on the uniform. It's not a thing on top of it, but it's within the uniform itself.
Right, yeah. Mhm.
So that highlight, to answer your question, Mike, is when the
Decisions.
State Education Department says what commitment to change by 2025
Okay.
means, we'll be able to know.
Okay.
But it's highlighted because we're prepared to have to move it up to B in order to make
Sure.
sure that we're being compliant.
Probably with all the money that they're going to give us.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
It's gonna be
That
the
big check
same
they're gonna write us.
document, the same
Yeah.
document.
So just to, sorry.
I'm sorry, one of the questions that's happened in the past is getting the uniforms back at the end of the season.
Yes.
And that's kind of all over the place about responsibility and
Right.
counter. Do you have a plan for that? to
Yes,
kind of
I was gonna touch on that, if that's okay, just to, I'll definitely get to that. So I just wanted to know, obviously, working with Dr. Bailey and Jesse, as far as, from a school business administrator standpoint, I appreciate your support talking about, moving forward with this. Obviously, our budget line currently is $15,000 for uniform replacement, and I know just right off the bat, a little bit of feedback from other schools, they don't even have a uniform replacement line, so I do know how important that is here, and I appreciate that. So we are gonna look at, obviously, some of our bigger years are gonna cost a little bit more. I'm definitely looking into ways, sort of, are there avenues where we can save a little bit of funds so we can kind of push forward with some of this project again to make sure that we're equitable and being fair to all of our teams. Obviously being proactive through the rest of the school year with our remaining funds. Again, we touched on only ordering things that say RCS at this moment. Just obviously a big organization and uniform project. All of the uniforms that I could find have been organized, sorted, laundered. They're currently in a more secure location. I'm working with our O&M department to make sure that they are locked and they are all in one place so we know exactly where everything is located. They're all labeled by bins and in boxes currently. We're also looking to make sure we have proper storage as far as kind of consistent bins. So again, when our things are stored during the off season, that they're being obviously saved and appropriate for the next season and all ready to go. To touch on your point, we updated our document for uniform ordering, purchase, policies, procedures. I don't know exactly what the term for the document is, but just basically making sure that our procedures moving forward are much more consistent and organized. The coaches have expectations as far as giving out uniforms and then the return process. When I was at Albany Academy, we had an equipment manager who was very successful at documenting all of our uniforms and the sign-out process for students with obviously school property, the return process, and we retrieved obviously a lot more uniforms back within that process. So I'm kind of looking at that and how we could sort of adapt that here to make sure that all of our purchase uniforms are coming back and that they're being taken care of and lasting longer. The uniforms obviously are going to be consistent with our branding guidelines and policies. We don't want anything to be kind of differing from what we want our students and our look for our school to be. I will have the final approval for all uniforms that are ordered. The ordering will be going through me moving forward. Again, the 4-year rotation plan, we'll keep it consistent unless changes need to be made. Obviously, contingent upon use, if there's stains, if there's rips, the need or any change in requirement per NISFA Section 2, our league rules. All of our purchases will obviously be discussed with our business manager and our district office. Also, another thing, our coaches, obviously, the policy replacement plan will be communicated at the coaches meeting, so they'll have that information. The coaches that are due on the schedule to get new uniforms, they'll have that information plenty in advance. So I know one thing, sometimes you order something from a catalog and you're not satisfied with the quality, so that gives us extra time to get samples in, to look at it, to see if that's something we really want to move forward with purchasing, and if it's something that's going to be great for our kids.
What is our process for teams when, say, they're ordering warm-ups on their own? So let's say a team just says, hey, we're going to go order warm-ups. So the coach is going to order warm-ups. Who's going to approve those to make sure that, we have the right, not using the spear, not using an Indian head? And then I guess to take it the next step is a lot of our teams, almost all of them, send out, web stores that parents order from and everything else. And, should we be approving those at the school level, whether Dr. Bailey does it or Jen, who wants to do it or who's going to be in charge, to make sure we start changing or looking at our brand when it comes to those items as well.
And have it match. Like our website right now is all over the place. You could get anything you want to make yourself or whatever. So I don't know who does that now currently, but that could be something you could work together and maybe even have the same store of where parents can go and buy, and there looks the same color as uniform, same logo, same everything.
I think that's another piece. I think that's kind of going on with the rebranding piece, is just making sure that we're all consistent, we're all equal, same colors. I know Mr. Funk and I are just in quick conversations with BSN Sports, kind of looking at design and what does that mean for the schools in general, but also with athletics and how we can pair them together to make sure that we have a consistent look.
Well, and I think it goes from top down. I mean, people order stuff, whether it's for A.W. Becker or the middle school. Everybody has these fundraisers. It's a school thing and a sports thing all together. I think that we have to just make sure we're all on the same page and have the same colors and same, like you said, brand.
And I'm happy to have approval over any additional gear that is ordered as well for the teams to make sure it collaborates with our uniforms.
Good.
And that's, when you said coaches meetings,
Yes.
is that incorporating any of the outside faculty, people that are not within the district, parents,
Yes.
coaches?
Mm-hmm. All coaches that are coaching in every season, I have a seasonal coaches meeting with all of our folks.
Okay. And if they're coming on at that point, they're going to have enough time if they're responsible for replacing uniforms?
I can bring them up to speed as quick as possible, but I mean, there may be a case where we had already ordered the uniforms if there's a change in transition. But again, I think moving forward, we're all going to be with the same brand, and it should be a little bit smoother, and the expectations should be there.
What was the timeline we set for ordering? Was it 6 months?
Yes.
Ahead of time?
We tried to give them, I think, a January heads up. But I appreciate your time. I'm happy to share any additional research or documents that I put together, everything that has been shared with Dr. Bailey or Jesse.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We know it's not easy.
So Jen will be reaching out to the coaches for 23-24 now for purchasing for next year. That's the kind of timeline that we're talking about. That way, if we're doing it all at once, we're ensured that we'll have the ones for the fall, which is really August, right? And we'll have the ones for the winter and the spring. And we also know with supply time, we always have to plan well in advance. So we decided to set as a benchmark January, February each year for purchasing for the following year, so that we are well in advance and we have everything that we need in sight.
Because we have an Ella bowling banner. I saw Jen had an RCS bowling banner made up, and now it's being hung up at Dell Lanes for the bowling team. So it was just RCS branded things like that. So I assume you're going to have to replace the banners in the gym.
It's on the next slide, right?
She's already started with one. It looks good.
Yeah.
I don't want to underplay one other thing that Jen mentioned is centralized location for all of our uniforms and inventory. all of our staff, they are well-meaning in everything they've done, and some we've had coaches for decades in the same sport. So it's just natural. They might collect things and keep them in a classroom or in a storage closet in the elementary school, and that is not the best practice. So she's working with Bill Schramm to find a centralized location, clean, safe, and secured, so that we know where everything is. In the event that there's a change in coach, we know where the things are. And certainly, if we have a question, we want to know what the condition is of the cheer uniforms. We can just go look. We don't have to go find them somewhere in the district. So as Ed was alluding to, when we went out as a Buildings and Grounds Committee, we just walked the high school, and then most of the branding is in the high school and middle school. And we were just trying to eyeball some things that we saw as immediate areas that would potentially need to be rebranded, because the first thing that people have said when given the task of coming up with a new mascot or having to change mascots is, who's going to pay for it? So we do need to know up front what the cost expenditure is. I initially was going to share the expenditures tonight, and I had some, but not all. So we're going to wait until 2 weeks from now, and ideally we'll have all potential costs related to this. Some of these items fit really nicely into our ongoing maintenance plans, where we would have been doing work anyway, or we choose to do it a year early in order to get done what we need to get done. So it may not be, for instance, if it costs $30,000 to sand down and refinish the main gym floor, we may do it a year or two earlier than is recommended. But it's not as though, all right, we've got to go do it right now, and it was only done a year ago. So we will have to take into consideration the things that will be on time and the things that will be early and the things that we wouldn't had to have done unless this task was given to us. So here's a relatively short list of the larger scale things that we'd overtly seen. And the one thing that's not on the list, of course, is the hundreds of thousands of pieces of, what's that stuff, swag, that our community owns as well. So we'll have to, it's not a direct consideration for the school district from a monetary standpoint, but it certainly is one from a community standpoint. The larger scale ones that are on here, obviously, the main gym floor in the high school, the pool at this juncture, we have to investigate whether it can be changed or replaced with the water in it. If not, the pool has to be drained, which we traditionally only do when there's a maintenance issue, which we have had to do numerous times in the last 10 years. The turf field, we talked about life expectancy of a turf field being 8 to 10 years, and about the time, if they are holding us to the 2025 timeline, we're about year 8 at that time. So although it'll be an expense, and it's an expense that we would have expected to have had to some extent.
Dr. Bailey, do we have any direction as far as the spear itself? Like, I know there's talks about Indians, and I know the Indian head, but would we have to remove the spear?
Spears with feathers, arrows, those things that are clearly Native American iconography would.
So we can't be like the spears or the spearheads?
Don't think I haven't played that one out.
Just throwing it out there, just other maybe options, and thought maybe we
Yes,
could.
I was debating like whiteout on some areas, and I think that it's all encompassing. Anything that would be inferred as a hatchet with feathers on it, all those things would be inferred as Native American.
Brian, have we got any more direction in terms of the commitment to make the change and then presenting a plan as to how you would unfold it? Like, nobody was going to expect that all of this is done in one calendar year. So
Correct.
if you said that we have a regular replacement cycle and we're going to take care of this here, I mean, that sounds like that's going to be a reasonable plan going forward.
Jesse will bear testament that I was in his office and raised voice today saying if we knew what commitment was, commitment could be we're going to have a committee that meets in September. Commitment could be, here is the exact timeline of implementation of all the changes, and here's our new name. I don't know.
Right.
But the public, what's that called? Response, public.
Forum?
No, I know, public forum. New York State has the proposed regulation out for public comment. That's the word, right now. And that closes probably within the next 30 days. And our BOCES superintendent has asked on our behalf, where is the rest of the guidance? Because a legal document does not a good direction necessarily give. After the public comment is done and this goes forward, that may precipitate more clarification on that. And when in my portion of the meeting, I was going to describe some of the timeline things that I was thinking of in order to get there. But if they say commitment by 2023 and execution by 2025, June 2025, that gives us a good 2 years to do a lot of work.
Yeah.
Community-wise, and whatever replacements need to occur. So that's what we're operating on right now. And I will talk about some timeline things for you there.
Is there an expectation that, you talked before about the spirit here owned by members of the community. Is there an expectation that that won't be allowed on school grounds at some point in the future?
That was reported, Mike, but it was reported in a news article. And what I want is the guidance from New York State.
Yeah.
It might have been discussed at a Regents Board meeting and then reported out in the Times Union, but there's no clear bullet point.
Right.
It has been said, at least by the news.
That's a very important point, because that has implications in code of conduct and disciplinary action and negative consequences, and the list can go on, and
They're going
It's
to say,
personal property.
now you're saying I can't wear an
Yeah.
article of clothing
Yeah.
that
that
I
has special
purchased.
meaning to me.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
It just, the school can't be projecting that.
Yeah. Very complex. And,
I
my
don't know if
hope
somebody's
is
gonna
that.
ask that as part of the public comment period, but
Yeah, it's
that would be a
true.
great
Yeah.
question to ask for anybody who's submitting comments.
Community team?
How does this impact my own personal property that I own and
Right.
would like to continue displaying?
I don't receive funds from you.
Right.
Between
No code of
the
conduct.
January meeting and now, we did post a brief article on our website pertaining to this. It has the link to submit a comment around the proposed regulation.
Yeah.
So we do encourage people to do so. Logic would say we would be in charge of our purview, the things that we have responsibility for, our staff and our students. And it may not extend to enforcement of things that are beyond what we are here and responsible to do. We'll find out though.
Yeah, I mean, that's the question though, right? Wearing that clothing on campus.
I know. So as we look forward, at our next meeting 2 weeks from now, O&M and technology, which makes sense because they're both under Bell Shrum's umbrella. We'll have our K-12 program about a month from now, exactly a month from now. Transportation, food service, athletics. We'll hear the rest of the story, our budget for coaching, our proposals for uniform replacement at that time. And I'm not even going to bother explaining the capital exclusion project, but let you know that we absolutely need to do them. They're instantly reimbursable, and it's a good investment on our part. When we go back to our seats, we'll talk a little more about the budget calendar we have on your table there. Any other questions? All right.
We want to call out and thank you for the donation of $2,500 from Jim Wassam and family to the Dorothy Brian Roberts Memorial Scholarship Fund. So thank you for that donation. Any other discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion's passed. You need a motion for one or all of the personnel considerations.
I'd like to make a motion for 7.1 through 710,
You want to put 7-Eleven in there for?
or 711.
Okay.
Oh, yeah, 7-Eleven.
Do you have a
I
second?
ran it by you too.
I missed it.
Mrs. Burns? Okay.
good.
Any discussion?
Yeah, I'd just like to call out 7.1. It's tenure.
Hello? Okay, yeah. So 202. Approve the 10-year, yep, got it, of Danielle Burns. So congratulations.
Congratulations.
It's coming up in April. All in favor? Aye. Motion's passed. 8 is informational items only. Special reports. One of the things I just want to bring up and thank, and I'm sure Dr. Bailey will possibly bring it up as well, so I'll keep mine short, but thank you to all of our RCS staff members and our SRO officers for the fundraiser basketball game on Saturday for the class of 2024. It was a great turnout and very successful event, and really happy and thank the community for all the donations and the people who volunteered to put it on, and of course those who played in the basketball game. Looks like next year maybe we'll have to get our staff to have a couple of practices before the game, and be a little, huh?
Not breaking nose.
Yeah, a lot of sheriffs and bringing in the ringers for the game. Any other board members?
I would like to just, I guess, highlight the fact that there's a student at RCS that just tied the record for points. Girls varsity basketball player Hannah Vanderzee tied the school record. She had a really, really uncharacteristic night, and would have normally scored way many points. I think the moment got to her a little bit, but I fully expect that in the next game she will take the lead for the school. So I want to thank her and give her the appropriate due.
Good. Congratulations.
The wrestler, Olivia,
Oh, yeah.
she's
Yeah.
third in the state. Olivia had
Correct. She went to wrestling, New York
An all
State
women's tournament.
women's wrestling.
Well, she has multiple
championships.
talents, right?
Yes.
She does everything at the top. She's an unbelievable musician, student.
Yep.
Yeah. So congratulations to her
Olivia.
as well. Good. I will turn it over to Dr. Bailey.
As I had mentioned, we've placed a updated budget calendar on your table here. And it's important that we hit our targets for publication around the budget. And the Postal Service is different than it was not that long ago for many reasons, and timeliness is so important. So we are required to hold the budget hearing no longer than 14 days prior to the vote. Yeah. So our calendar is strategically played out that way. The budget hearing is happening on May 3rd. Our newsletter cannot go out until after the budget hearing is held. But the content of that mailing needs to get done because it needs to have been printed so it can be dropped in the mail by the 4th. So in order to ensure that we get to all of the right points and we're able to publish the board-approved budget, we had asked to add a budget workshop at the end of February. Excuse me, at the end of March 29th. So that meeting is not on our calendar. And a budget workshop, just so you know, there's no other business that occurs. It's informational. There are no votes and no action. It's just a public meeting starting at 6 o'clock. And we present whatever elements we haven't done. Or at that juncture, yeah. Yeah, it's bringing everything together that we've already presented. It's not new information. It's just the final information. But by having a meeting on the 29th, it allows us to compile the data for printing, and then the adoption of the budget on the 5th will go to print on the 6th. We'll be ready to get it out by the time we have our budget hearing. So just so you know why we're asking for the additional meeting. We were afraid if we waited 2 weeks longer and there were still some things that were undecided on by the board, we may or may not end up approving the budget by mid-April, and it would be very problematic for us to get things printed in time. So that's why we're asking for The other thing I was talking about at the podium was formulation of a plan for what we do about our branding. The only thing that we know is that at this juncture, it's an ultimatum that we are expected to change with not a lot of guidance around it. What I was going to propose is we have a seated committee called the District Leadership Team that's made up of K-12 staff as well as some parents and leaders from the district, that we have our meeting in March, that we formulate a committee. We talk about the makeup of the committee from at large that we will use to come together, talk about what questions we have for our public, what do we have to consider through the process. They'll formulate a survey to go out to our graded population, both to students and to the public for their input. They'll analyze that after we get it back, and then we'll present that information to the board. In the end, the board is going to be the driving force for what happens as we go forward. We know how clearly we want as much input as possible, but we thought that a committee of the community, and as I mentioned, the district leadership team will help decide like how many students do we want on it, how many parents do we want on it, how many staff, how many board members, if you want to be on it, so that we have the right group there to help make decisions. It obviously can't be 100 people, it's got to be a reasonable amount, but it has to be representative. And we know that student voice is important. They live here every day. As much as we all have the branding that we have from our own experiences, the kids live here every day. So that would, what that would do is that would help us establish a plan by June 2023 that the board could commit to. I don't expect that we're going to have a new mascot on June 2023. That's not feasible, responsible, or probably possible. This is going to be a multi-step process. So if the committee does its due diligence, we'll have a good plan that the board can stamp and say, here's our commitment and how we're going to meet our timelines. And also, ideally by March, the state will actually have told us what it is we're supposed to do, so that'll be helpful as well. Does anybody have questions or suggestions? Okay, and the last thing is the timing of the budget vote. You'll note that we had the referendum for construction from 1 to 8 o'clock. Our budget vote has traditionally been from 7 in the morning till 9 at night. It is convenient because we have people who stop before they go to work in the morning. We have people who stop at lunch when they get off shift or when they're in the middle of their day, and we have people who come after work or at nighttime. The complexity of having the polls open that time is we have 2 complete poll workers. That's a polling workers that have to be there. Sue is working the entire 14 hours as well as some of our other staff because that's what's required. We had proposed, and it's on our budget calendar, for the budget vote to be from 1 to 9. The reason why we extended to those hours is people who work first, second, or third shift potentially could all be before or after work in that window of time. Not before work if you are working first shift, but before work if you're second shift, after work if you're first shift, and before work if you're third shift. But we wanted to seek the board's input around that. I don't have any idea of the history of, or why or how long it's been from 7 in the morning until 9 at night. And I will say it's unusual. That's not the most frequent way that people execute it. It is usually 1 to 8 or 2 to 9 in those areas.
Previous votes on,
How many people use those earlier hours?
right?
We can
You
certainly
keep
tell
track of every hour? Like how many people come in every hour?
Sue keeps track of everything.
Officially, not
Sue keeps track of everything.
We'll share it with you in 2 weeks. That's an excellent question. And I think what you'll see is if we were to call, let's see how I am on my odds, Sue. If we were to call it a 1,000-person vote, just to call it all things equal, I think you would see probably 100 to 150 in that window from 7 to noon. 7 to
like
11,
10% of the
Yeah,
vote is
10 to
in 5
15%
hours.
in that first part of the day.
one of
And then the other 85% from noon till the end of the day. But we'll get the hard numbers for
Worst
you.
time is like at 5 o'clock is the worst of the day.
Meaning a lot of people.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Everybody's coming after.
We'll try
I don't know if
and,
they would vote after I got my daughter off at school.
Brian, I don't know if I missed it. Are you talking about changing the hours? Is that what?
Yeah.
from 1 to
1 to
9,
9.
instead of 7 to 9.
Why? Is there a big cost?
There is,
It's a long
well,
day.
we pay polling workers for the additional shift.
Right.
And there's not as many polling workers, if you can believe that, but Other than that, there's not an additional cost. And it's also the inconvenience to our staff because we're in a working building, so none of the classes can meet in there during that time, although May is not as difficult as trying to do that in January.
Would changing the hours potentially impact dismissal? I know that you try to have routes that don't go through campus, but if we're compressing the time frame and more people go during the new time frame, would we be bringing more people to campus when we're trying to dismiss students?
The 7 o'clock one definitely causes more trouble than starting at 1 in the afternoon.
Okay.
Because people are getting in that 7 to 8 time, they're in with all the buses. We'll get the hard numbers for you. We'll share them with you 2 weeks from now. And we'll try and get pre-pandemic numbers because I think that will be more relevant if we can. I don't know how far back we have the data on that.
It would help on arrival,
You
hurt
should-
on dismissal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Less cars on arrival, more cars on dismissal.
We can talk about
May?
Ah, a couple of years.
last May.
Go back to when Kristen beat Brett.
Yes. A long time ago. 9 years.
So Fred's unable to be with us tonight, and I wanted to capitalize on some of the other things that some of the board members have talked about. You talked about Olivia Ortiz and her being at the first annual statewide women's, they called it girls, women's wrestling state invitational, and placed third in the state. And she happened to be at the basketball game on Saturday night, and she was saying it was the first time she had ever wrestled 6 matches in a day. So that was a stretch for her as well. But she does tend to be someone who excels at everything she does, which is very exciting. And our players were able to go. The Sports Association contributed, and we had some money from our budget. And I think Justin said 27 teammates and some other fans were able to take a bus out there and watch her compete. And above her victory, Justin said the other kids came back, eyes wide open, were awe-inspired by the event. So it was a good investment and a very exciting time for them. You saw Odie was here, and Trish Grogan. Odie's been in the building now for a little over a month, and Waffles is our newest member. That's Peter B. and Becker dog. He'll be shared with Jenny Wolf is the adopter, and there'll be teams in both buildings, and I'll send more information along with that. He'll probably be joining us next week. We did Discovery Camps this last summer using our grant money, and it was a little bit different take on the summer work that we've done with kids. It was experiential and project-based and modularized, and we plan on going forward with that this summer and continue to use our grant money. And there'll be interest schedule going out soon to allow parents to give us their feedback and opt into that.
Will it be students who need the assistance go first, or open to anyone? Like, how
We're
is that?
we're considering how to expand it as best we can. Traditionally, summer programming has been for students who we thought needed remediation the most. It was a little more expanded this last summer,
Okay.
and we hope to expand it more because it was beneficial. Everybody who came,
Okay.
yeah, we're going to go as big as we can. The music department had 8 students participate in Albany Pro Musica Choral Festival, I think this past week. And Mish Husmendi's creative writing class has been going down to Peters B to do read-alouds with the kids, which is awesome. And our high school First Tech Robotics Challenge, the robotics team came and presented to us in the fall. They were at their first competition at Albany Academy, and they placed 5th out of 19 teams, which is awesome. And Fred does this so much better than me. Oh, Carl Haney Coquelin, and Elizabeth Robertson, both were selected for their artwork to be in a juried high school art show at Columbia Green Community College. And that's happening, and it started last week and will go through February 23rd. Oh, look at that. Okay, one last thing. And I knew this because I saw it on
Fred
Facebook.
definitely doesn't need that.
In case you saw the pictures, because Deidre had me going through the pictures and said, there's body parts here. Do you want me to show these pictures? So the high school counselors came over to the science department and they did a career exploration presentation on histotechnology, a science behind studying human tissues. So we had a specialist come in and show with the anatomy and physiology class, as well as Mr. Miller's AP biology kids, and they got to explore some things that they've never been able to explore before, which is real world stuff. So, and all those things have been on our Facebook page, which is great. Okay, I feel good. Thank you.
All right. Turn it over to Mr. Bone.
All right, I have just two updates, and I promise I'll be quick. So I just want to give you a quick update on the capital projects outstanding. We did have 5 proposed construction managers come visit the district on January 25th, and Bill did a walkthrough with them on some of the things that we would plan for our $15 million project. He did get some confirms from some of the individuals that they will be bidding on it. So I think we should get a few bids for construction managers, and we'll be accepting those bids all the way up till February 15th. As for the $2.3 million project, unfortunately, I don't really have much more of an update on that. It's still up at SED under, at this point, architectural review. So
They have some of the review done.
okay,
They have some of the review done, but as Jesse's described, the architectural review is the one that
takes a long time.
languishes, yeah.
That one tended to take much longer than the other ones. So.
So I have a quick question.
Sure.
Not all of the items within that smaller project have electrical and plumbing associated with it. Are those items moving forward, or does the entire review have to be approved before those items can be started?
So my understanding of the process, and I'm definitely not an expert on it, there's a few different phases of it. First is mechanical, they go through the whole thing. Then there's another individual that does the architectural to go through the whole thing. And then there's a final where a individual manager of SED reviews the whole thing. So I don't know the exact process with each review, and then maybe we can find out from our architect. He might know a little bit more. But that's kind of the process, and generally what I've seen is the architectural review does take the longest. And I don't know exactly what's involved with that, but we can try to get a little bit more information.
I think it'd be nice to get an update on where we're projecting when work will start, because I think we had originally thought with the smaller project, we really thought as a board we were getting out ahead of it and that it would be executed in this school year. But I think we are now hearing and seeing it's probably not going to be that. So it would be a nice update for both the board as well as the community to see where we are in that process and what it means to the timeline.
Yeah, it's
Estimated timeline.
yeah, it is very difficult to give that estimate. I definitely will touch base with our architect, and I can reach out to SED as well, see if they can. The problem is there's a lot of people in the queue.
Oh, agreed.
Yeah, and then you don't know the complexity of their projects and questions and answers.
So
and that kind of
can
stuff.
we, taking out the SED review, is there a way for us to estimate, once there is approval, how long it takes to, if it's hire someone, if it's an RFP process, if whatever it is, can we estimate those kind of activities to say, once we do get approved, here's what it's going to be, right?
Yeah, that is much more attainable. We can definitely do that. And we have both, Tammy and I have both talked to the architect and said, once we get that approval, we want everything lined up. We want to go out to bid right away.
Right.
Yeah. So,
Okay.
yeah, we can definitely give you a better timeline
All
for
right.
that, the next one.
Now,
Absolutely.
we've run in the past that there's certain times of the year,
Yes.
if things get pushed out, that make it not optimal for putting things out for
Absolutely.
bid.
Absolutely.
Where are some of those pressure
So
points?
I know in my experience in at different districts, the problem is a lot of these schools try to do work in the summer, right? So, and there's several schools that go out. So if you're going to bid later on in the year, you're going to run into companies that work in schools of, hey, listen, I'm all booked up, I'm sorry, I can't. Or if they do put a bid in, it's higher than what's expected. So generally we try to get it ahead of time, The earlier the better for the summer. So the closer that we get to the summer, there's more likely we might have to push it.
Jesse, with the bids that we get from these contractors, we're bound by law to take the lowest bid, correct?
Lowest qualified bidder. So we have to do a review on so we get recommendations, we interview them, and
So
I mean,
we would
so I could come in and
determine
say,
if they're qualified?
I'm a construction manager, I bid $10,000. Technically, I'm the lowest bidder, right? But I'm not the lowest qualified bidder. I don't have the experience, I don't have the knowledge to be.
And we do that research on?
Oh, absolutely.
on that?
We'll be doing it, and our architect will help as well.
So you can tell somebody we don't feel that you're qualified and
Yep, it's part of the bid package, yeah. We have references and where you've worked and that kind of stuff, and we'll be making phone calls.
I think we did interviews, I don't know if we did it as a board or if we did it as a construction committee.
Yeah, I
The
remember.
last time where we did construction manager interviews, I think we brought 3 people in and asked questions and qualifications.
So for the,
Materials into account when they're bidding? So is their bidding just their labor, or is it
Construction manager is only the person overseeing our project.
just the construction manager?
They're making sure.
Yeah, we haven't
that-
gotten into the bidding part.
Of the
Okay.
contract itself.
Okay.
so for the construction manager position, it's actually a professional service. We're not required to take the lowest bid. Like hiring an attorney. You can hire any attorney you'd like. We'll be responsible, and we will be doing interviews at the end of February for our construction manager, the ones that Jesse mentioned. From a bidding perspective, when they do bid, Pete, they have to call out, you know, the architect has created a punch list of all the things and all the materials that have to be accomplished. That person who's doing their bid has to be reflective of it. That's why the architect is so integral. They're able to look and see, well, they've omitted putting a roof on the building.
Right, that's what,
That's why
you
they're
can see
bids are
someone
low.
lowballing.
Right.
If I remember right, I think they bid almost differently as well. They don't, like, I remember, like, there might be a lump sum and then different percentages. Is how the construction manager would bid. Is that correct or not?
The construction manager is straightforward. It's a
just a
stipend,
contract.
it's a paid service at a fixed rate. It's
Okay.
usually a percentage of the contract is what their,
Right.
you know, overall contract. They're easier because it's less complex.
Right.
Time on site, the difficulty of the work, things like that. And for Bill's question, so if state ed stalls, and it is a lot easier to get approval to have a field resurfaced than it is to have a new electrical system installed in a building. The layers of engineering are so different, and they require, like Jesse tried to describe, all the different people who have their hands on it. If you're doing simple work, if we're just replacing sheetrock in here, that's something that could be fast-tracked in state ed. So we could break things out if we absolutely wanted to.
Yeah, I'm just thinking like the fencing, right? We talked about putting fencing up. That's not gonna go through the same review as, you know, doing something where you're
Correct.
tearing apart a classroom or you know, doing electric and things. That's
Exactly. And sometimes there's advantages to breaking it out, and sometimes there's not.
Right.
Because you want the people here with their trailers and their equipment doing the work.
Right.
And I would say, as Jesse reflected, we're in February 1st now. We have February and March, and if state ed comes back later than March, I would say we probably would not choose to go forward this year, because everybody's piling on and trying to get contractors. So we would conscientiously probably make a choice to move into 2024. We'll see.
Okay.
The other thing I want to talk about tonight is the first responder tax exemption. I know in early December, the governor signed into law a first responder tax exemption, which allows local municipalities, which includes schools, the option to adopt up to a 10% exemption for local fire and ambulance companies. You know, we're still gathering some information. We have been getting phone calls from local departments, local chiefs have been reaching out. We wanted to get some clarification on some of the items from the state. There's a lot of questions being asked about this, so we really wanted to gather all the correct information before we presented it to you guys. Also, there is some tax impacts for the volunteers as well, and we want to make sure that we have a complete understanding of that as well, so that we can inform them exactly what their exemption would look like. So, and the first part of that will be a public hearing. So once we gather all that information, we will let you guys know when that public hearing will be happening. And then obviously, we'll be advertising that.
How's that different from, was it the veterans communication we had a few years back?
Yeah.
Is it a similar structure, just
Yeah,
different
it's
populations?
a little, yeah.
And we did not go forward with that then, right?
We did.
Oh, we did, okay.
And there's a whole sphere, you can choose a percentage, the same percentage that they say, or a lesser percentage of what they say. And as Jesse's alluding to, there's a compounding factor if the town, the village, and the county all opt in. There's already a tax exemption for volunteers as a dollar amount tax return. And how would that be offset by reduction in their property taxes? There's a lot that goes into the recipe here. And the public hearing would likely be before one of our board meetings. That's typically how we've done it, and invited the public.
And we also want to have an understanding of how it will impact everybody else in the community. So we want to gather that information as well. So we give you the total package.
It'd be interesting because with a veteran, you're always a veteran, right? With a volunteer, you're a volunteer for as long as you volunteer.
Yeah, that's definitely one of the questions that we're asking is the service credit.
Yeah.
How long is it? And is it, do you do it for 5 years? Do you do it for 10 years? Do you do 20 years?
Whatever, yeah.
What's the requirement? So yeah, there's a few questions out there that we need to get a hold of before we can really bring this to you guys with solid information. That's all I got. Thank you, Bob.
Okay. New business. Any board members have anything they would like to add? Old business. We went through some of these things already. Committee meetings, minutes are attached. We have no policies for review, no hearings and petitions, right, Sue? Okay. Our next BOE meeting is on 2/15. We also have a tax exemption hearing on the same night, correct? Looks like. Senior citizen and disabled tax exemption. That'll happen at our board meeting or before our board meeting. And there's no reason to go into executive session.
I'll make a motion to
Adjourn, okay, a second. Ms. Hoteling, all in favor? We're out.